If you saw that over 27,000 people were signed up for the April LSAT and your first thought was, we're cooked, I get it. I mean, that is a big number, but that kind of reaction is what costs people points. Yes, April registrations did jump over 43% from last year, and they're almost double what they were in 2023. And everybody's melting down over it, saying the cycle's doomed, scores are going to inflate once again, it's over. I want you to take a breath because registrations do not mean more competition. Every year, there is a drop from the number of people registered for the test to the number of people who take the test to the number of people with reportable scores from that test because people withdraw before the test, people reschedule their tests, and people realize 2 weeks before the test that they are not ready. They might panic and cancel, they might no-show. The registration number is the ceiling. It is the maximum number of people interested in taking that official LSAT test date. But it always shrinks. And here's something else. The people most likely to withdraw are not the people scoring 170 plus. It's the people scoring below their goal. It's the people who are thinking, maybe I'll just try it. It's the people reacting emotionally. And so that giant number does not show up on test day in full force. Now let's talk about why registrations have spiked over the past couple of years. We've got logic games off the test, and more importantly, some people want to take it before remote testing is banned. You've also got more people who are waitlisted trying to increase their scores. Interest in law school goes up when the job market feels weird. Lots of different reasons here. But none of that means that the average student suddenly became better at logical reasoning. It means uncertainty makes people act. And when people act, they usually rush and cram, and that does not produce elite scores. Now, panic will help somebody, just don't let it be the other people. Because when thousands of people sign up for the LSAT out of fear, a lot of them are going to burn one of their takes too early, they'll score below their practice average, they will retest under pressure, and they'll start chasing points emotionally. Meanwhile, the people who can stay calm are the ones who keep building their skills. Now, there's this misconception that more people taking means lower scores for everybody, but that's not how this works. The LSAT is not curved against the other people taking the LSAT that day. If you exhibit 170 level performance, you're going to get a 170. Doesn't matter how many other people signed up. Your score is about your raw performance adjusted for difficulty. That is it. Where competition matters is in law school admissions. And admissions cares about medians. If a given law school's median's a 165 and you score a 169, you help them. You're not one of 27,000, you're a number that moves their stats. And that does not change because the number of registrations went up. If anything, higher medians make higher scores more valuable. Now, here is the uncomfortable truth. Most of the anxiety about there being a crowded cycle comes from people sitting right at the median. If you're aiming for a 160 at a 160 school, yeah, volume feels scary. But if you can push your score to a 166, 167, 168, you're not in that crowded middle anymore. The solution isn't worrying about how many people signed up. It's separating yourself from the rest. Now, the LSAT has changed. No more logic games, which means there's less brute force. Logical reasoning and reading comp now drive everything. You can't just memorize setups anymore. You actually have to understand arguments, track the flaws precisely, stay focused for 35 straight minutes, 4 times because there's 4 sections. And building those skills takes time. You're not going to improve just because Reddit panicked. If registrations jumped because people thought no games, easier test, a lot of those people are going to be humbled. Top scores still come from deep review, and let me be blunt about review here. If your review sounds like, oh, I just misread it, oh, that was a silly mistake, or I was rushing, that's not real review. High scorers can explain exactly why they missed it. They can say, I miss strengthening questions when the right answer adds a missing bridge, or I lose points in reading comp when I don't track viewpoint shifts, or I rush the last 5 questions in logical reasoning because I never check the clock at question 15. If you have that kind of clarity into why you're making mistakes, you're going to improve your score. It's not going to come from obsessing over registration data, it comes from analyzing your mistakes. And here's another thing. Registration spikes don't equal applicant spikes 1-to-1 because some people taking the April LSAT aren't going to apply this coming cycle. Some won't apply next cycle. Some people are going to change their mind about their career. Some might delay their applications after they get a low score. And so the pipeline's going to narrow. Elite score bands don't magically double just because interest in law school doubled. And the number of people scoring 175 plus is limited by the number of people with that level of skill. So the real question isn't, are we cooked? It's, how do I get 5 points above the median at my target schools? Because that 5-point difference can mean getting in off the wait list, getting tens of thousands of dollars more in scholarship money, and that's what gives you real leverage when you're negotiating those scholarships. And that doesn't disappear in a busy cycle. If anything, it matters more in a more crowded cycle where there are more people applying. Now let's talk about mindset for a minute. The loudest voices online are usually the most anxious because high scorers are actually pretty boring. They just study. They track their practice test averages. They log their wrong answers. They build their stamina and they take it when they're ready. They're not rushing attempts or chasing rumors. They're not spending their time on Reddit. And so yes, 27,000 is a big number, but you're competing inside a score distribution. So I want you to focus on doing what it takes to move up that distribution. Start studying earlier than you might think you need to. Do deeper review, not just more sections. Train full timed sections to work on your pacing. Track patterns in your mistakes, in your error log, and aim higher than the minimum you think that you need. That is what you can control. And of course, registration numbers will rise and fall. You can't do anything about it. Reddit panics every cycle, or in fact, every single testing administration. And building your skills is unrelated to how many people are talking about this test or taking this test. If you can build your skills, you're going to be fine no matter what happens in the macro. And if you'd like my help getting your LSAT score up, building the skills for a 170 plus, I'm here to help. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link to book it is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. That is an open offer. For those just joining, I offer these free lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. I see a ton of questions here in the chat. I'll get to as many of those as I can. Just keep them coming here. Let's see, got a question here from Vlad asking, I have a 4.0 GPA. I'm a history major from UCSB. What kind of LSAT score do I need for a scholarship from USD Law School? And so a 4.0 GPA is, of course, great. Can't do much better than that. I would look at the particular LSAT medians for the law schools you're targeting. Different law schools have different LSAT medians, and that determines the requirements. I'm just going to do a quick Google search here, see if I could help you out with that. All right, so I'm seeing here that this is just from Google, might not be the most recent data, but what I'm seeing is that USD's LSAT median's a 163, and their GPA median's a 384. And so you're a little bit above on the GPA median, which is great. That means maybe you could afford to be slightly below on the LSAT median. I wouldn't want you to get complacent, though. Keep in mind that law schools always want to raise their medians, right? So it's possible that a 163 or so might be all that you need, assuming that is up-to-date information. But there's no reason not to shoot for a 180, right? Always aim for the highest LSAT score possible. Mid 160s, 163 might be sufficient to get you in. But if you want a scholarship, you probably want to aim higher to put yourself in the best possible position. So I'd want you to apply with at least a high 160s, if not a 170 for the best outcomes. If you want a full scholarship, of course, aim even higher than that. Po Boy asks, I took my LSAT remotely. It's currently under review. Will I get my score? Yeah, probably. I mean, I can't speak for LSAC, but LSAT score holds are far too common, unfortunately. LSAC is pretty concerned about the cheating that's been happening recently, and that's part of why they're discontinuing the remote LSAT after June. In the meantime, anybody taking it remotely might be at increased likelihood of getting a score hold, but assuming that nothing inappropriate happened, you should get your score back, but it may take a little bit of while if they're manually reviewing lots of other people's exams as well. So I'm sorry to hear about the delay. Hope you get it back soon. Colton's asking, I'm graduating with a bachelor's in communications. Is law school realistic with a good GPA and LSAT? Yeah, I mean, you can major in literally anything and go to law school. What you major in doesn't really matter. It only matters insofar as it can facilitate you getting a good GPA. And so if you have a good GPA and a good LSAT, regardless of the major, you've got a good shot at admissions. Of course, the question is, what is a good GPA? What is a good LSAT? Good is relative, right? But the better your numbers, the better your odds of getting in. The question is, not only do we want to get into a law school in general, we want to get into a good law school. We want to get into a good law school with good scholarship money. Let's get you good outcomes, not just outcomes, right? So if you had a fantastic GPA and a fantastic LSAT, you could get into a fantastic law school with a fantastic scholarship. Wouldn't that be even better, right? And so I would say, ideally, I would love for you to have a 4.0 GPA and a 180 LSAT. Not saying everybody's going to get that, of course, by definition, not everybody will. But if we could get you a 4.0 GPA with a 170 or 175 LSAT, that could get you some pretty stellar outcomes. So let's shoot for that. Since you're majoring in communications, which is, I'll venture to say, is a relatively easier major than some others, like it's easier to get a 4.0 in communications than in comp sci, right? So I would expect and hope that you would get a great GPA. I'm pushing for you to get a 4.0 GPA in communications. If you can't, that's okay. But if you're majoring in something relatively easier, let's give it your all to get you the killer GPA that grade inflation should earn you, right? Then get you some time in your schedule to focus on the LSAT to get your LSAT score up. In terms of what kind of law school numbers you need for a given law school to get in with good scholarship money, you're going to want to be above the medians, ideally. And that varies depending on the school. Omar asks, 3.2 GPA and a 150 LSAT with a double major in law experience, am I admissible? Yeah, I mean, you can get in. You are someone who can get admitted. The question is, where will you get admitted and what kind of scholarships will you get? To be frank, a 3.2 GPA is below average. A 150 LSAT is also close to average, but technically below average. I would like to see a better LSAT from you to offset the lower GPA, because you can't easily redo all of undergrad. Your GPA is what it is. And I see in a previous comment you're saying that you didn't study for the LSAT and you got a 150. I mean, so that explains why you got the 150. But why don't you just study for the LSAT and raise your score? The LSAT's the biggest factor in law school admissions. You're selling yourself short by not studying for it and applying with subpar numbers. I'm going to assume the GPA is what it is, and we're not going to redo undergrad, so we're going to leave that as a done deal. But if you could study for the LSAT and improve your score by 10, 15, 20 points, you're going to have radically better admissions outcomes. I think you would be doing yourself a disservice to apply to law school without studying for the LSAT. Your competition is certainly studying. And so the scholarship money that would have gone to you is going to go to somebody else who worked harder. And that'd be a shame, because you can work hard. You could put in 6 weeks of studying for the April LSAT if you're signed up for that one. If not, you go for the June LSAT, give it 3.5 months. If you raise your score 10, 15, 20 points, you could save tens of thousands of dollars in scholarship money, maybe even 6 figures in scholarship money. That's the easiest money you're ever going to make. I mean, where else can you put in 5, 10 hours a week at minimum for a couple of months and earn $100,000? That's pretty easy money. If you look at that on an hourly basis, you're probably making more studying for the LSAT than you are in your job. So let's put in the time. And if you want to talk through what that kind of study plan could look like for the April test or the June test, I mean, we could talk about it. You could book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me. The link to book it is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link's below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. Happy to meet with you personally, help talk you through a plan of attack. I see Cream Crispy's asking about our program and how it differs from others. I mean, we offer more personalized coaching programs. A lot of the other options out there are going to give you videos and webinars, but you're not going to be able to talk to a real person and get feedback on what you're getting wrong and why. And so if you want to get some support in a more personalized context where we actually look at how you're approaching the questions and craft for you a custom study plan, you can reach out and book a call with me. We look at what's your current score, what's your goal score, what's your time frame, how can we get you from here to there over that period of time, and not just throwing a bunch of videos at you. With our programs, you get private one-on-one coaching with a real person. You meet with them consistently, ideally every single week from now till your test. We create for you a custom study plan, and then you also get access to live semi-private small group sessions in the evenings, but those are all optional and all recorded in case you can't make them. But the real magic happens when you can join live and talk with other students, other coaches as well. So we customize the program to the individual student, but it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all like some of the bigger options out there like Kaplan or Princeton. I'm just scanning through for other questions here. Omar's asking what methods I recommend for studying. And so we could divide LSAT prep into 3 major phases: accuracy, pacing, and endurance. Accuracy is where you're drilling questions by type to better understand the proper perspective from which to view each section and each question type. Pacing is doing individual timed sections, working on how you're allocating time over the course of the section. And then endurance is doing full-length timed practice tests, so that test day feels like just another run-through. Of course, you want to start first and foremost building a strong foundation in the different LSAT sections, the different LSAT question types. You got to build the foundation first. A lot of students will make the mistake of jumping into practice tests without establishing the foundation. Then you've got other students who do nothing but drill questions by type, but they're only doing a question here, a question there. They're never working on pacing, doing them in a timed setting, and untimed doesn't count because test day is timed. It's not enough to get the questions right. You got to get them right under test day conditions, considering pacing and time management and endurance. And so when we build a study plan for our students, we make sure we incorporate plenty of full-length exams, ideally 10 to 15 full-length timed practice tests before the big day, so that test day itself will be like just another run-through, and you've done it all before. And so again, if you feel like you're at risk of neglecting one of these phases, if you're not sure if you're studying the right way, if you're worried you might be wasting your study time, then book the free tutoring with me and we could talk through what your study plan could look like. I see Shreybot's asking, if I'm an econ major with a 3.6 at Georgia Tech, what LSAT score should I get for top 30 law schools? And then Phaedra's pointing out you got to look at those schools' ranges on the 509 reports. That's exactly right, Phaedra. So every single ABA accredited law school has to submit their LSAT medians and their GPA medians to the American Bar Association. And so there is some degree of transparency where you can see what kind of numbers are required to get into a given law school. So for any law school you're considering, you look up what's their LSAT median, what's their GPA median, and that gives you a general sense of the kind of numbers you've got to have or beat to get in or get scholarship money. And a 3.6, frankly, is below the medians of a lot of law schools because of grade inflation. And so you're going to want to have a relatively higher LSAT score to compensate. For T30s, I would probably want you to have a 170 plus for the best outcomes in terms of getting in and getting scholarship money. But again, you got to look at the particular law schools that you're targeting. And then within T30, there's, of course, a pretty big range. I see Jababa is asking, I get almost every question right, but my timing is weak. How do you recommend improving this? Well, do some more timed work. We got to work on your pacing. In logical reasoning, the questions are presented in a general order of difficulty, meaning they get harder as the section progresses. You've got approximately 26 questions in the logical reasoning section that you've got to complete within 35 minutes, but some are easier than others, some are harder than others, which means you want to go faster on the easier questions, building up a time bank that you can then apply to the tougher questions later in the section that truly need it. And so as a general rule of thumb, I would recommend trying to solve the first 10 questions in roughly 10 minutes. So less than your average of approximately 1 minute and 24 seconds per question. So you're solving the easier ones faster, so you'll have more time for the tougher ones later that truly need the time. And so you want to start by saying to yourself, how can I learn to trust my gut on the easier ones, not second guessing myself, not double checking and triple checking on the easy ones, so that I'll have more time for the tougher ones later. Note at question 10, when you've completed that one, how far along are you? Did you take 15 minutes? If so, you're going too slow. If you only gave yourself 8 minutes, maybe you're going a bit too fast. You got to find that happy medium and ultimately learn to develop your own sense of rhythm so that you will naturally solve the first 10 questions in about 10 minutes, and you'll complete the entire section in roughly 30 to 33 minutes, ideally, so that you have a buffer of a couple minutes at the end of the section. And we could talk through this more on the call as well. But yeah, rereading, double checking is costing you too much time. You probably don't need to double check or triple check on these questions because they are relatively straightforward. You should go with your gut on those and give yourself more time for the tougher ones later that really need the time. I see Ashton's asking, I got a comp sci master's degree overall 389 GPA, but my undergrad GPA is a 301. Will the undergrad GPA be an issue? Frankly, yes, it will, unfortunately. For law school admissions, they only consider your undergraduate GPA. They don't consider your master's degree GPA. That is not factored into your LSAC GPA, which is what is used in the admissions formulas, unfortunately. They take your undergraduate GPA with the LSAC conversion. They combine that with your LSAT score, and that, broadly speaking, determines your chances. Obviously, soft factors play some role, but not really a significant role, unfortunately. And so while they will see your master's degree GPA, it's not what counts. It's unofficial soft context, but not quite as important, unfortunately. On the LSAC conversion, I can't speak about it in specifics because there's too many fine details to it, but you can go on LSAC's site and read more about it. And of course, you can also send in your transcript and you'll get the actual calculation. And to Jababo's question here about if you've transferred undergrads, they do combine all the GPAs that go into creating your first earned bachelor's. If you have multiple bachelors, only the first bachelor's is what counts. But if you went to multiple institutions, all of them combined that went into your bachelor's determine your LSAC GPA. And if your GPA is not what you would have liked it to be, unfortunately, it's too late for that component, but you can still improve your odds of admission significantly by getting a higher LSAT score. The good news anyway is that LSAC weighs your LSAT score more heavily. The law schools weigh your LSAT score more heavily than your entire undergraduate GPA combined. So you still have a lot of potential to improve your odds of admission for law school. So let's focus on what we can control here. I'll just get you a higher LSAT score. That's really the biggest thing you could do at this stage. Thanks for all the great questions, folks. Keep them coming. I'm just going to scan through here for other questions that are coming in. I see some folks asking about what's a good major for law school? What can you major in? I mean, you can major in literally anything and go to law school. Law schools do not care what you majored in. A lot of folks will major in pre-law or criminal justice or political science, but ultimately there are no prerequisites for law school. All that matters is that you did well, you got a good GPA. There's no negative marks on your record of any sort for any academic discipline or things of that nature. Social work is fine as well, to Nani's question here. If you were certain that law school is what you wanted to pursue, you might want to choose classes where you're going to get easier A's, just because grade inflation is real and law schools don't care what you majored in. They just care about the GPA itself. And so majoring in something that will tank your GPA might not be a great idea for law school specifically. Of course, I'm not going to say don't pursue your interests, but if you're confident law school is what you want to pursue, you don't want to take classes that will tank your GPA. I made that mistake myself. Unfortunately, in undergrad, I took an econ class and it did not go well for me. It was brutally curved in contrast to easier political science classes, which was more my forte and was easier for me to get a high grade in it. So I learned not to do that again. But yeah, learn from my mistake. Don't take hard classes if you can avoid it. I see Nani's asking, does the college matter? So no, LSAT, law schools also don't care where you went to college. The prestige of your undergrad does not factor into admissions. And so if you went to Harvard for undergrad versus a state school, they're going to be viewed largely the same. They're just going to want to see what's your LSAT, what's your GPA. And of course, you're probably in college already. You're not going to change where you're going to college, most likely. Of course, you can technically transfer, but easier said than done. Just focus on getting a higher LSAT score and maintaining a good GPA. Those are the two biggest things you could do. But things like where you went to college, what you majored in, if you did internships, none of these play that big a role. And thinking about them honestly, or spending time in those areas could be detracting from your just getting better numbers. Like, the simplest path is not the easiest path, but I think that's why a lot of people are asking all these other questions. Like, study for the LSAT, get a high score, do what it takes to get that high score, maintain a good GPA at the same time. If you're early in college, if you're a freshman or a sophomore, you don't need to worry about the LSAT yet. Just focus on maintaining a good GPA, enjoying college, deciding if law school is really what you want to pursue. The LSAT's not going anywhere. You can come back to it as a junior. And then if you say to yourself, hey, you know what, I really do want to pursue law school, then go hard at the LSAT. Take a lighter course load one particular semester so that you don't tank your GPA. Study hard for the LSAT, knock it out. Hit submit on your applications fall semester, senior year, if you want to go straight from undergrad into law school. And a good timeline might be take the LSAT in June for your first take, August as a second take. If you're currently a junior, you then apply this fall in September when applications open. If you're currently a sophomore and you really want to do this now, you could knock out the LSAT early, take it this summer or fall. Maybe you take it in September, study hard for it over the summer, lock in that score. Your score is good for 5 years. So you could secure your LSAT score early, then rest easy while everyone else is studying for it, knowing that you already got it done. I see Sarah's asking, can I still take the LSAT in April if I start studying now? I took a prep class in January, but fell behind. You can take it in April if you're already signed up. The registration deadline for the April LSAT was yesterday, Thursday, February 26th. And so it's too late to sign up for it if you're not already registered. If you missed the deadline, then you could just go for June, of course. April's pretty tight anyway. It only gives you 6 weeks from now. Not a whole lot of time, especially if you've fallen behind and if you haven't been studying for it recently. And if you were in that class but you fell behind, maybe you didn't get as much out of it as you could have. You might get better outcomes by going for the June LSAT instead. just to give yourself more time to achieve your fullest potential. I see you're asking, is it doable to take the June LSAT starting now for a 170 plus? Yeah, it's possible. I guess I'd be curious to know how much time can you put in per week? And if you've taken a diagnostic, where are you currently scoring? If you can put in 10, 15 hours a week, it's doable. If you're already in the 140s, 150s, it's doable. If you can only put in 4 hours a week, like I see Luke is saying, that's not really a whole lot of time. 4 hours a week, that's not even 1 hour a day. It's more like 30 minutes a day. I would ideally want to see you making it more of a priority, giving yourself more time, given the importance of the LSAT. If you can only do 30 minutes a day, I think that you might want to set a longer time frame. Or give yourself, ideally, ask yourself, number one, how badly do you want this? And number two, do you have too many other obligations right now such that you're not able to make this a priority? I mean, the LSAT is the biggest factor in the admissions, and it weighs more heavily than all of undergrad combined. So I would ideally want you to significantly increase the time you can devote per day and per week, because your competition is putting in 15, 20 hours a week at least. I know, because I'm helping a lot of them. And they're back-burnering other things in their life to focus on the LSAT because they understand the importance of the LSAT. If you can only do 30 minutes a day, I mean, you could take it in 6 months, but you may not ever achieve escape velocity, meaning achieve momentum in your prep to start really recognizing the patterns and letting things sink in more. Typically, I want to work with students who are doing at least 15, 20 hours a week. If you can only do 10, 15 hours a week, we could still work with that, but anything below 10 hours a week becomes closer to just 1 hour a day. And then you kind of end up skipping a day here and there, and skipping one day becomes skipping 2 days. And then before you know it, it's been a week and you haven't touched it. And I see Sarah saying that she sees people studying the LSAT for years. And I mean, a lot of those people are people who aren't actually studying every single day for years. They're studying for years because they're not really studying. They're doing an hour here, an hour there. A week or two goes by and they haven't touched it. They keep coming back to it periodically. But again, because they're not able to carve out the time and block it off in their schedule, they don't achieve momentum. So the first steps are take a diagnostic, see where you're at, use it as a benchmark from which to measure your later future progress. And then use that diagnostic result as motivation to encourage you to study harder, because you want a 170 plus, and your diagnostic may not be a 170 plus right now. You can take a diagnostic for free on LSAC's Law Hub platform. They offer you 4 practice tests in the official LSAT format. You can get the others with a Law Hub Advantage subscription for approximately, it's $120 a year. You get the other 55 exams in the modern LSAT format. Well worth the investment. I see Vanessa's asking how many times you could take the LSAT in a year. You could take it 5 times in 5 years. They eliminated the cap on tests in a single year. So yeah, 5 times in 5 years, 7 times for life. If you get a 180, you can't take it again. They offer the LSAT 8 times a year. Coming up, we've got April, June, August, September, October, and November. April gives you 6 months to study. June gives you 3.5 months. Then you've got 4 consecutive test dates leading into the fall. I see Vanessa's asking, if I study 2 hours a day, can I get into the 160s in April? Maybe. 2 hours a day ain't bad. That's roughly 14, 15 hours a week. And if you could do more than that, great. Again, but we got to have more context. I mean, where are you currently scoring? Have you taken a practice test? And then what kinds of support are you getting for your prep? Are you self-studying with just the practice tests, or are you getting personal coaching, or are you taking a course where you get live feedback on what you're getting wrong and why? If you're lacking the support, it's going to be harder. If you're getting the support, it's going to be easier, because the thing is that when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know. And so getting some expert guidance from someone who's been there, gone through that process themselves, gotten that top score, it's going to make your path forward that much smoother. And so for that reason, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book the free tutoring is unpluggedprep.com/start. Links below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. I see Braden's asking, if you could go back to when you were studying for the LSAT, what is the biggest piece of advice you would give yourself knowing what you know now? And so it took me an entire year to study for the LSAT and end up with my 175. If I'd done it properly, I could have done it in just a couple of months because the LSAT's a test of pattern recognition. If you can spot the tricks and traps, you can avoid them. It all comes down to understanding how the test makers think and seeing it from their perspective. And once you do that, everything changes. And the study technique I adopted ended up evolving into what we now call the Socratic Review Method. And that's the cornerstone of my courses and my coaching programs. And basically, it's root cause analysis. You want to get down to the root cause of what you're getting wrong and why, so that you can avoid making the same mistakes again. And so we ask you a series of guiding questions live in the coaching, and you can also adopt that very same process for your own self-study. For example, we ask you, was your mistake in the argument, the question stem, or the answer choices? Was it in your approach to the text, or was it misunderstanding the text itself? Was it a tempting wrong answer, or was it an unappealing right answer? Meaning, was it a trap of encouragement towards the wrong answer, or was it a trap of discouragement away from the right answer? Because if we can get to the root cause of what you're getting wrong and why, we're going to nip it in the bud, and you're not going to make the same mistake again. And so if I could do it over again, my number one biggest piece of advice would be to engage in that review process, that root cause analysis, using that Socratic review method, rather than just making the classic mistake of taking exam after exam after exam, hoping that something is going to change, when in reality, nothing does. You're burning through valuable, limited practice material, essentially banging your head against the wall. So taking fewer exams, reviewing them in more depth. And so if you're concerned that maybe you're making that kind of mistake, that you're studying a lot, but it's not effective, or you're not studying a lot and you're lacking the accountability, the motivation, and the support, where you're not even able or willing to carve out an hour a day, maybe you need some structured guidance, a personal study plan to keep you accountable, block off the time in your schedule, help you achieve that steady forward progress. I saw a comment saying that someone's taking the exam, like taking a diagnostic every 6 months, still stuck at 150. And so what that tells me is that you're taking a practice test every now and then just to see where you're at, but you may not be doing enough work between the practice tests taken once every 6 months to actually move the needle and improve. Technically speaking, a 150 is below the average LSAT score, for lack of a better word. But there are 5 major phases of LSAT prep that we incorporate into our students' study plans. I call this the LASER approach to LSAT prep. LASER is an acronym standing for Learning, Accuracy, Sections, Exams, and Review. Exams, taking practice tests or diagnostics, is only one phase of the plan, and that comes after 3 other phases. Phase 1 is L for learning, building a strong foundation in the different sections and the different question types, understanding the proper perspective from which to view each section and each question type. Then you've got A for accuracy, drilling questions by type to help those patterns sink in. S is for sections, doing individual timed practice test sections to work on how you're allocating your time over the course of the section so that you know when to slow down, when to speed up, how to allocate your time, not getting bogged down, not getting stuck, moving at a pretty fast pace, but not too fast, developing your own internal rhythm. Then you have E for exams and endurance, doing full-length timed practice tests to build up your stamina so that test day itself will feel like just another run-through, and you've done it all before, We have our students typically taking at least 10 to 15 full-length timed practice tests before the big day, typically 1 or 2 a week. One if your schedule is pretty busy with other obligations like work or family or school. 2 a week if you're studying for the LSAT full-time with few or no other obligations. Then R for review using that Socratic Review Method. So you see there's a lot of things we got to do. Learning, accuracy, sections, exams, review. That's the laser approach. We use that framework for our students' personalized study plans. There's a lot to work through. I mean, we ask a lot of our students. I'm not going to sugarcoat that, but that's how we get the results that we get. Your improvement is a function of the amount that you study, and more importantly, the way in which you study. Leveling up your efficiency could be the biggest game changer, as well as keeping yourself accountable to put in the time. Scanning through for other questions here. Dizzle's asking, I took the LSAT in 2008. How much has the LSAT changed since? It has changed a lot. And I've been teaching the LSAT since 2005. So I've seen all of these changes and then some. I mean, the biggest changes, to summarize, would be the move of the LSAT from being on paper to on the computer. The other big change would be the removal of logic games starting with the August 2024 LSAT, about a year and a half ago. They brought the LSAT online during the pandemic about 6 years ago. Logic games off the test a year and a half ago. And there have been other minor changes since then, but those are the biggest ones. And so what this means is that if you're studying for the LSAT out of books, you're not studying with the right format because test day is not going to be on paper, it's going to be on the computer. And part of why students' scores drop 5 to 8 points from their practice tests to the actual is because they didn't properly simulate test day conditions. I did a score release live a couple days ago for students getting their February LSAT scores back. And of course, there were folks on the live who didn't achieve their goals because if they had, they would have been off celebrating or doing something else. Instead, they were there because they wanted to figure out their next steps for the retake. And when we look at why their scores dropped, it's typically either not properly simulating the test day format, not strictly timing themselves, not taking it on the computer using LawHub software, could be nerves or anxiety, a bad proctor, tech issues. And so part of how we mitigate those score drops is by familiarizing you with the test day interface, taking your practice tests under real timed conditions. The other thing is that with the removal of the logic games section, so yes, Roxy, logic games are off the test. What that means is that if you're using outdated materials that reference logic games, you're studying for an exam that no longer exists. After LSAC removed logic games, they replaced it with a second scored logical reasoning section. What this means is that if you're studying logic games, you're obviously wasting your time. And secondly, you should devote roughly 2/3 of your LSAT prep time to logical reasoning because it is now 2/3 of the test, and any gains you make in your understanding of logical reasoning will be doubled across the 2 sections. Additionally, and this is a more subtle, unannounced change to the test, when LSAC removed logic games, they made some subtle, unannounced changes to logical reasoning. They started incorporating more formal logic into the logical reasoning section, more conditional statements into logical reasoning. In other words, because they can no longer test those concepts in logic games, because there is no more logic games, they want to test those concepts in a different way through the logical reasoning section. So you see an increased prevalence of what folks call mini logic games in logical reasoning. And this is not really some new radical question type, but rather it's an increased inclusion or prevalence of questions that have always been on the test, but they're now including more frequently. So what you can do is, and we do this for our students, of course, you go into the old exams and you devote a bit more time to certain types of logical reasoning questions than you otherwise would. And so for every one of those questions on an old exam, you study 2 of those for potential prep on your new exam that you're going to take officially. And so we give our students more prep on formal logic, conditional statements, contrapositives, linking conditionals together, focus on numbers and percentages, quantitative reasoning, it'd be a good idea to do that if you're taking the LSAT anytime going forward, because you will see more of those on your test than you would have in the older exams. And then one more subtle change to the LSAT that's not really a big deal, but took some folks by surprise this year, is that LSAC is no longer always including a dual or comparative reading comprehension passage in the reading comp section. Ever since June 2007, they've been giving you 3 long passages and then 1 pair of dual or comparative passages, but they took some folks by surprise when in January, they did not include a dual or comparative passage without warning for some students. So if you don't see one, don't be surprised. This doesn't have to change how you prepare for the test, but you should be ready for potential exclusion of the dual comparative passages. And so, yeah, you don't want to study with books from 2008. Those books are outdated. Toss them, give them to your worst enemy. You want to use up-to-date materials. In general, I wouldn't use books because the LSAT has undergone so many changes that any books you're studying from are likely outdated. If they're referencing logic games, they're certainly outdated. And of course, no print book is going to be talking about a change like the removal of the dual passages that only occurred last month. And then secondly, of course, because the LSAT's online, you want to study online to familiarize yourself with the LSAT test day format, the software, the interface, the functionalities, the highlighting, the underlining, the flagging functions, and so on. And for that reason, all of our tools are online. Everything we offer is digital on the computer. Remember, doing our coaching via Zoom, FaceTime, Google Meet, so that you can meet in real time without the hassles of commuting in person to a classroom or anything like that. And by the way, folks, if you're finding these lives helpful, please spread the word. Share this to your social media. Share it in any group chats you're in, or Facebook groups, subreddits, Discord. I do these lives every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever you're watching this. If you're looking for support, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring with me, if you haven't already, is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. That's an open offer for everybody watching this now or later. I see Danielle's asking, what should an applicant do to improve their application during a competitive year? Get better numbers. Fight fire with fire. Basically, when the bar is raised, you got to raise yourself up to meet the bar. And so there's a lot of grade inflation. Schools give out easy A's in undergrad. There's also LSAT score inflation. And so both of these are contributing to rising LSAT medians, rising GPA medians, and there are more people than ever applying to law school. Last cycle had 76,000 people applying to law school, only about 42,000 people matriculated into a law school. So a lot of people applied, ended up not getting in, ended up not going. And of course, you don't just want to get in, you want to get in with scholarship money. The numbers for this cycle are not yet done, but according to the most recent reports, applicant numbers are up 15% year over year already from what was already the greatest number of applicants in 15 years. And so you're going to want to have better numbers to compensate. And your GPA from undergrad might already be a done deal. So you may not be able to improve that number, but you can improve your LSAT score. So retake if you think you need to. If you've already taken it, take again to do even better. The LSAT's offered 8 times a year. We got coming up April in 6 weeks, June in 3.5 months. Law schools do not penalize you for taking the LSAT multiple times. They only take into consideration the highest LSAT score on your record. If you do better on your retake, great. If not, no big deal. So be open to retaking. That's probably the number one thing you could do to improve your odds at this stage. Of course, you can work on your application essays and your resume and your letters of rec, but if you don't have the LSAT score, no amount of editing of your essays will make up for that. In contrast, if you do have the score, then yeah, of course, switch gears, but get the score first. I see Diesel's asking, law schools no longer average multiple scores? Yeah, so I know you were at this back in 2008. So this change goes back to 2006, actually. The American Bar Association changed its policy in 2006 to switch from requiring law schools to submit the average of multiple LSAT scores on your score report to instead only submit the highest LSAT score on your score report. And so what this means is that you are now incentivized to retake the LSAT because only the highest score counts. If you do better on a retake, great, you've now got a higher score. If you do worse or it stays the same, no big deal. You've still got that high score from before. Yeah, I know it's been a while, and that's okay. Things change. We just got to update to the changes. And so if you took the February LSAT or the January LSAT and it wasn't what you wanted it to be, if you're signed up for April, go for April. If you're not already signed up for April, the deadline's passed, go for June. You could take it in June. And then if your score is not what you want it to be, take it in August for a retake, and you can apply the second applications open in the fall. And I think that everybody watching this now is in a great position for next cycle because you're watching now, you're planning ahead, you're studying early. If you start your LSAT prep now, you could give yourself 5.5 months, take it in August. That's plenty of time to achieve a top LSAT score, and then hit submit on your applications the second they open in the fall. And the benefit of applying the second applications open is that law schools operated on a rolling admissions basis, meaning they evaluate applications in the order in which they're received. And when you apply earlier, it's easier to get in, and there's also more scholarship money available. And law school is expensive. The federal government has eliminated the Grad Plus loans, capping how much you can borrow for law school. And so to make up the gap between what you can borrow and how much law school costs, you don't want to go for private loans, ideally, right? Instead, what you want to do is get discounts on your tuition by applying with better numbers, incentivizing law schools to give you merit scholarship aid, reducing the tuition that you're liable for, effectively giving you a discount on law school, making it cheap, potentially making it free, giving you a free ride to law school. Optimal outcome, we see it happen every single cycle on the basis of applying with stronger numbers. And so if you want help improving your LSAT score, help getting higher numbers, better admissions, better scholarships, book the free tutoring with me. The link is unpluggedprep.com/start. Links below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. I'll be back on Monday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. I'll see you all then. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care. Thanks for joining.